Resurrect Priest. So maybe a slightly different build would have been better there. But either way, that is now done and dusted. We are moving on to the match I'm most excited for this week, Possessi and Blitzchung, Gia.
Rightfully so. I think everybody who's been paying attention to the brackets would be most excited for this particular match, except if you're Chonsu maybe dreading this match the most, because Blitzchung is deciding the fate of not just himself, but also Chonsu, who Lorinda has rightfully called a sitting target, because after not making top 8 this weekend, he was not able to add any more points to his total, meaning that if Blitzchung ties his 7 points, Blitzchung wins the tiebreaker and gets that last spot. So we are going to see the same classes and the same sides that they're represented on compared to the last series. Again, Paladin, Shaman, Druid always left up, and now Possessi with a Mage, Blitzchung with Priest.
Yes, and I believe it is the same build of Priest that we saw from Kin earlier on in today, in just the previous series, with the Resurrect Priest. Again, looks like a very similar list as well, with the one Holy Smite, as well as all the removal and the late game as well thrown in there. Somewhat unsurprising. I'd be very unsurprised again if they were practicing together, given that they are both Hong Kong players. And we are seeing more and more, I feel like, countrymen in Hearthstone grouping together, at least in the Asia-Pacific scene, and helping each other to practice for the lineup. But it does look like Possessi as well is maybe seeing something to prey on here by leaving up the Priest.
Yeah, you could make the same assumption that Possessi and Glory have been talking, knowing that this top 4 is just cleanly split, 2 countries versus each other with 2 representatives each. I think both Possessi and Glory agreed that they saw a weak point in this Resurrect Priest, because maybe it's not able to consistently draw the exact pieces of removal it needs against Murloc and Totem boards.
That's been the bane of Priest since the start of Hearthstone, as far as I see it. But I think we just got word that it's not going to be the Priest in the first game. We're going to see the Mage from Possessi. I believe it was up against the Druid from Blitzchung. A somewhat interesting matchup where I feel like who is the aggressor and who is the defender actually shifts multiple times within the game.
Yeah, true enough. I feel like in that first wave, it's generally Druid to present the first threats with, say, a Glowfly Swarm board. If Mage has the response, something like Reno or Dragoncaster into Blizzard, then suddenly Mage gets all the tempo back, and then Druid has to default to their backup game plan of redrawing with Overflow or trying to get a Mount Seller board. And it can be very swingy like that, which is why I really enjoy watching this match.
I feel like Possessi, though, is one of those players who's very, very strong on the Druid. We've seen it week after week, with the Japanese players very much relying on this deck. Bit of a change in the build here, which may hurt Possessi in this... Oh, sorry, Possessi on the Mage and Blitzchung on the Druid. Okay, well, that'll be to come later. I apologize. But the build for Blitzchung, actually the opposite, so it's still a good talking point. Ysera is in the deck for Blitzchung, but not Possessi, which we've seen in previous weeks can be absolutely huge in these slightly slower matchups, because it means that every single piece of card draw that you're left with, which is quite often a fair few in the late game, becomes a threat in its own right.
True enough. Pioneered by Rivius, at least in APAC, as early as week 1, we saw Ysera play a major role in his games versus Mage. And we can also see a tech inclusion for Blitzchung, the one of Starfall. Probably not going to be too helpful in this particular matchup, but he's still got enough threats, I think, to maybe get there, especially with a start with Bungle Fortunes and the Glowfly Swarm.
Interesting start here for both players. It looks like at the moment, Possessi will probably be okay in the face of at least one Glowfly Swarm, given that he can maybe set up a preemptive Doomslayer and then have Reno plus a Arcane Breath, to take out the rest.
Right. Blitzchung's hand is just... He's got 2 awkward turns, right? This turn and next turn if he doesn't top deck either Innervate or Overgrowth. And Possessi's played an Ooze, I think rightfully so, knowing that it's not going to deal with any weapon, probably not going to get better than it is on curve. So Blitzchung, without any removal spells, strangely, there's so much in the deck, but he's not got that option. I was wondering if he felt like he would expend 1 Power of the Wild here, but he says this card gets way too much value later on.
It's actually an interesting point you bring up about the Ooze, because I think it maybe could have got better if you play it on turn 3 specifically. Because, you know, if you look at the curve they're trying to go for, 3, there's nothing they really want to play necessarily, apart from removal spells like a Bog Beam, Wrath, Crystal Power, whereas 4 they want to play Overgrowth, and then maybe you're more likely to stick it onto one of their big turns later on. I might be getting a little bit too deep here, and he just wanted to get it down as soon as possible, but I think he could maybe saved it for a more awkward turn for Blitzchung one turn later.
Given the nature of his hand, I see your point, but I think that just developing it with the mana in hand, with the chance of top decking things he could play on 3, like Arcane Intellect,
Good point.
I feel like probably lent him to that decision. But anyway, Blitzchung is able to put down the first wave of threats if he wants to. Just 6 Glowflies, still above Coin Reno range.
Yeah.
But Rolling Fireball can deal with 4 of them cleanly. Reno also, most of the time, I believe, deals with 4 and leaves up 2 2/1s. I would assume that's the most likely outcome.
Yeah.
But yeah, Waste Warden, very clean here. I wonder if there's any argument for holding it back. But I suppose knowing that later on Blitzchung's able to play Glowfly plus a buff or plus a Soul of the Forest, maybe the Waste Warden gets worse at that point.
Yeah, I see your point. It arguably gets better then, because that's one of the ways that you can get through a Glowfly plus a Soul of the Forest with something like Waste Warden Coin Blizzard. But that's a little bit too later down the line, I think, to be worrying about. Right now, Possessi should be focusing on going for as much mid to late game tempo as possible. Very possibly with, who knows, a Dragoncaster plus Puzzle Box next turn is not the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen.
And Blitzchung cycling the Wrath there as he's kind of desperate for card draw, and I absolutely agree with it. Its hand just panned out quite awkwardly for him, that he's getting to the 7 mana naturally, but not with any Bog Beams or Iron Barks to really cash in with the Mount Seller, and also with none of the efficient card draw in the deck.
I think he's just got to survive for the moment. I really wouldn't even hate next turn just seeing like Mount Seller Moonfire, or even just a Mount Seller, because it puts Possessi on the defensive, which buys Blitzchung time to hit Ysera Unleashed. Right. And once that happens, I think Blitzchung is just looking very, very strong indeed. He should be able to stay at least even, if not ahead, for the vast remainder of the game.
But the Discover for Possessi, a Flame Strike, I think that's an auto pick, but I think Possessi rightfully hesitated a little bit there, maybe trying not to give away that it's a premium spell, especially against Druid, and the hand is just all removal. He's even got an active Dragoncaster to pair with it if he wants. So Blitzchung, if he knew that that was the exact hand, I think he'd be inclined to save the Mount Seller, but given that, of course, he doesn't know what Possessi has, I can also see your point for just playing threat after threat into Ysera.
There was definitely consideration, it's fair to say, for Doomsayer there, because it would have maybe stopped a Mount Seller turn for one extra turn. But having said that, Possessi wouldn't have really got that much benefit out of it, because he doesn't have much to capitalize on an empty board next turn.
Reno with Coin Ping is absolutely devastating here for Blitzchung. One Mount Seller gone essentially for free. It's barely cost Possessi anything, as Reno is probably one of the more conditional removals in the deck, whereas Blizzard Flame Strike are a bit more premium. But the Overflow, in a few turns, this could come to Blitzchung. But this turn 8 is very awkward.
Yeah. I will say that even though the Mount Seller was dealt with very easily, I still very much like that he played it, because obviously we can see Possessi's hand is pretty much purely reactive. But from where Blitzchung is sat, maybe there's a Siamat, or a big, one of the big spells can come down with Power of Creation or the Deep Freeze. So I do really like just keeping up on the board here and setting up for that Ysera, which is exactly what he's doing, just making sure he doesn't fall behind. I think this is very smart.
And if there's anything you can't criticize Blitzchung for, it's consistency, because he's just stuck with that game plan. Play another Mount Seller for hardly any value. He knows it's probably going to get cleaned up for, if not 1-to-1 with the Reno, with just 1 or 2 spells cast from Possessi. And he is just going to completely rely on this Ysera and possibly Glowfly Soul of the Forest to get him there. So he's saying this game can't go long. just 2 more waves of threats. If they're consecutive, maybe Possessi can't deal with at least one of them.
It's a very weird game here. Possessi could choose to ignore the Mount Seller for the moment and go with, as we're seeing here, Conjurer's Calling. And get some pretty good results.
Pretty brave. Honestly, I was looking at just the Rolling Fireball. It floats a lot of mana, but he still got Reno on board in that case, right?
Yeah, I like this for a couple of reasons from Possessi.
Whoa,
I think,
the
wow,
Stinger is huge.
that's nuts. Yeah, I will say I think it's good primarily because if the Mount Seller survives, which obviously it did here, if they go wide with a bunch of spells, you can just Flame Strike to clear it all up, and you're probably still pretty far in the lead. And if they just go with Ysera instead, which I think Possessi may have a pretty good read, that's what Blitzchung is gearing up for, you can then just freeze and start going face for lethal.
You bring up a very good point. I guess the only downside is that if they have exactly Soul of the Forest, that makes Flame Strike a little bit awkward. But then he's got Blizzard anyway. And then knowing that the minions summoned are going to be beasts and not... Sorry, Mount Seller beasts and not Glowflies, at least a fair few of them will be higher than 2 health and not immediately dying to Blizzard. So I think that's a really good spot.
Not an easy play indeed, but I think well navigated. I'm liking, again, very much what I'm seeing from both players here.
Yeah. Blitzchung with the appropriate response as well, I think. Knowing that Flame Strike is a threat, or Blizzard at least, that Flame Strike was generated, but I do believe Possessi's running a natural copy in the deck, so Blitzchung should be mindful of it as well.
It's a tough turn now for Possessi.
Oh.
Blizzard, the fact that it kills most of this board is, as so often against the Druid, kind of a downside. You'd rather just have a Frost Nova hit, weirdly enough, than a Blizzard, because then he'd just be able to start pushing for lethal quite easily.
True, but I mean, it's not bad, right? He's got 3 minions on board that can value trade into 3 remaining ones. The ordering on that is a little bit curious to me. I feel like something should have traded into the Mount Seller and then he played Blizzard. Unless he's ignoring it altogether, saying that, okay.
Blitzchung obviously has to be careful here with the decoy there, because if he doesn't play Ysera before that dies, he won't get the Battle Cry value.
And there's just no other minions left in the deck.
None in the deck, yeah. That would be a disaster for Blitzchung. I mean, arguably, maybe it would be okay just because it's a 4/12 body that he doesn't have to spend the mana on. But I would argue he definitely wants to get that down wherever possible.
Yeah, we could see from the early games that early turns that was his game plan. He only shifted off of it because the Mount Seller actually survived, whereas he didn't expect it to. Zixor, an additional threat, pretty good.
Yeah, you can just draw Zixor Prime, and then that gets cheapened out of the hand instead.
Also for much less value, but anything to protect Ysera. Wait,
looks like he's going in.
Oh,
I think he just wants the body here.
Oh my gosh, and that's gonna get...
That's going into Reno turn. That can't be correct.
Oh man.
That can't be right.
Yeah, and he's not got a chance of drawing the Zixor because Fungal Fortunes would overdraw it.
That's right. Whoa! Is the ordering on that wrong as well? He attacked in first and then played it. Oh, that makes room for the Mount Seller to make another beast. Okay. So it definitely wasn't strictly wrong to do it that way.
I got the sinking feeling that Blitzchung realized in the middle of his turn the interaction between Blatant Decoy and Ysera, because we saw him trying to kill off the decoy and then...
He needs to leave room. Possessi can't just sacrifice it in or he doesn't get the Ysera. Sorry to cut you off there.
Yeah, no. Very good spot. So for Possessi, if he's hoping to snipe Ysera, he just plays Rolling Fireball.
Whatever, yeah.
On the right side.
Or a ping, you know, whatever.
Sure.
Just anything to make sure that this Ysera gets cheated out.
Oh! So Ysera will get its battle cry off. It's a very complicated situation, but will that be too slow? Possessi's got pretty premium Flame Strike with this Dragon Caster. Ability to push 6 space if he wants.
Yeah. Maybe he's setting up a situation where it's just too slow to play the Ysera at all. Doesn't look like it though.
Yeah, by taking a trade, it feels like Possessi's gone the other way around. Lot going on here, but
I mean, you have to play it here, right?
Absolutely.
This looks nuts.
He's even got Bog Beam Crystal Power clear off the whole board.
Yeah. Very weird couple of turns. Obviously, Possessi does not know that the Ysera is in hand for Blitzchung. It's very possible that it's just the last card in the deck. But I don't know. I feel like if you had the chance to just neutralize it there, you'd probably just take it.
I would agree. Even on Blitzchung's side.
Sorry, go ahead.
Even on Blitzchung's end, I wasn't sure if he was completely happy with that turn. Again, you did a very good spot that filling the board makes it a bit more awkward for Possessi, or at least presents an additional condition to make sure that the Ysera gets dirty ratted out. But we saw him shake his head. Maybe he wasn't completely happy with how it panned out either.
Blitzchung holding off for a turn, I guess, just trying to threaten lethal for a turn. Okay, this does allow him to get down the excess mana and then save that for Ysera next turn, so maybe he gets a dragon at the same time. I can see that.
I can see it, but at the same time, it feels probably like the best timing to have Ysera when it's alone on the board, the most space for dragons available. Sometimes Mage can set up boards where they clear a few minions and then freeze the rest, and then suddenly Ysera feels like it's going to be wasting value.
Possessi could start off with Malagos here looking for the Arcane Explosion for 2 damage, and even if he misses, he still has a decent enough rolling Fireball. So I like going for this here. He has a very good outcome and a reasonable backup plan. Fireball is tempting. I've got to be honest.
If he's been keeping track, he knows that all of the non-Ysera threats have been used now. Both Glowfly, Soul of the Forest, both Exotic Mound Seller. So maybe the value of Flame Strike individually has gone down a little bit. But at the same time, Fireball still doesn't quite get there because he doesn't have the other damage he would need.
It was tempting, but I think there's a pretty high chance that Blitzchung ends up with a very large number of dragons all on the board at once, at which point 8 damage should clear up the vast majority of them.
Oh, Blitzchung does not roll a dragon, despite it being a 7 in 11 chance to do so. Not that that's the exact number, his draw order is weird, but wow, Frost Nova Doomsayer off the top for Possessi here. Does this mean that Blitzchung has to Starfall the Doomsayer and play Wrath on it? He can cycle the Wrath,
I think this is smart. It potentially munches up a bunch of the dragons that come off the top here if there's no removal. And even if there is the removal, that's pretty good. And Blitzchung can kill off the Doomsayer, then he just goes for Reno and clears up everything anyway.
Oh no! 1 wasted dragon? Okay, just... Oh, 2 wasted dragons?
Okay, 2 dragons left in the deck now, I believe, with 5 being drawn.
The Starfall
will be able AoE.
To... Easy breezy Reno for Possessi, and Blitzchung's threats left are just the 2 dragons and Rising Winds, I believe, if you count the Little Eagles as a threat.
And they are technically a threat, just not all too much of one, it's got to be said. It's a weird situation here. It's not often, I've got to be honest, that you see Mage just run out all of Druid's threats, especially when you have Ysera in the deck at the late game. If it was like the deck that the Japanese players were bringing last week, where they just didn't have enough threats in their late game, then I could understand it. But this is a lot of dragons to munch through, and it looks like Possessi may get there.
Right, and I think he still got another Flame Strike in deck, because the first one came off Arcane Breath, this one came off Malygos.
Yep. Not bad.
Okay. Both
not bad again.
Decent attack sized minions.
Yep. And I think, like you said, Eagle swooping into the rescue here is Blitzchung's last and final hope of taking the win. To be fair, if he goes with Power of the Wild, the Alexstrasza is surviving the Malygos Flame Strike, which is something that maybe can get there.
I'm out of cards.
He will go for it. So, best case scenario, he gets the 9 damage stuck onto the board, and then 4 from Power of the Wild, 1 from Hero Power. Still not enough, though. He can buff up the health on Varanus. That's pretty big.
We can see that's clearly the best play here. I wonder if he'll spot it. He's seen a spell from Malygos and hasn't seen it played. So Flame Strike has to be pretty high on the list of what he thinks it could be.
Whoa! What? No! Has a box on its own? Blade Storm is insane. And
Wait,
I think there was
he's got 0
Forbidden
mana.
Words.
Does that mean Forbidden Words has been played?
Yeah, I think so. We've seen it before. What? Misdirection. Oh my goodness. Not again! Oh my god, not again! Sarah, not again!
That's game! He descends the turn!
Oh my god.
Okay, to be fair, I feel like it was probably over in Possessi's favor anyway, with the Malygos' Flame Strike he had in hand.
Agreed.
But what a way to end it.
Indeed. I mean, I just got flashbacks of Tyler Fleury, I believe, where that game was very, very unfortunate for Tyler, because all was not lost if he didn't get Pyroblasted to the face. In this particular instance, I'm okay with that bit of entertainment because Possessi already had the game locked up. But only this once.
I think it was like a small percentage away from locked up because the Alexstrasza may have survived at 1 health versus the Flame Strike. But I think I agree with you that if Possessi, given a couple of extra turns, could have pretty much locked that game out. And I'm sure he would have found the lines either way. But you can't really argue with Reno giving him Puzzle Box. That is also the line that Possessi clearly spotted. Very well played from him there in the end of that game. But I don't know about you. I definitely am going to need a moment to recover from that and gather my thoughts a little bit and wonder what I'm doing with my life after that insane puzzle box at the end there. So we're going to go to a quick break before we come back with the ridiculous but very, very important conclusion of this series of Possessi versus Blitzchung. All right, we're back. I've calmed down a little bit, and we're ready to jump into the rest of this series between Possessi and Blitzchung. An insane way to end things out at the end of that last game. But now Mage is, thankfully, some might argue, not me as a true believer, is out of the way. So we're not going to be having to deal with any more puzzle box nonsense in this particular series. We do, however, have, if you want to call it the fourth class, the most powerful class that is not one of the auto leaves up of Paladin, Shaman, and Druid. The Priest is still left up for Blitzchung, which I think we are going to get to see in this next match against Possessi's Shaman, which I thought at the start of the week would be an insanely blowout matchup for the Priest. But looking at what we've seen this weekend, and just at the raw stats in terms of the win rate, it seems I was wrong.
Yeah, it appears that Priest, if they're not able to remove that first few totems from Shaman, Shaman can then just health buff them with something like Totemic Reflection or Totemic Might, and suddenly they're out of range of the Breath of the Infinite, the Holy Nova, and so on. And I think this series holds a lot of parallels to the first one we saw today. Number one, the Mage being queued up first and winning for the Japanese player. And number two, the Priest possibly struggling against one of what we call the weaker decks. But it still is not all lost for Blitzchung, because on the other side, Shaman also really can just struggle to get back into the mid game if their early game threats are removed immediately.
It can indeed. Thankfully, though, the Priest, while it can remove in the early game, in the first couple of turns, there is 0 minion presence at all. The cheapest minion they play costs 4 mana in Vargoth and Bone Wraith. And so in those early turns, the best that the Priest can do is Holy Smite or a Penance to take out the totems at the start of the game, or at least start moving towards their more powerful AoE effects in the mid to late game. And so for Shaman, if they are able to find an Evil Totem or a Manatide Totem, Totemic Reflections, Axe, the list goes on, they should be able to stick something and start doing some pretty powerful plays.
Yeah, it makes me wonder whether cards like Totemic Might would even be considered in the mulligan for a keep, just because it's so important to get that health buff against Priest. But Blitzchung has a Penance available, probably the rest of this getting tossed away. And for Possessi, I'm looking at the Manatide and thinking that on paper it's probably good, but maybe it's a bit too slow.
It's weird, right? Because it is pretty good. I'm seeing a curve of Manatide into Splitting Axe. There's only really a couple of things that go wrong with Holy Smite or Penance, but maybe he just wants to go more aggressive. This isn't the ideal game plan, so he may just full mull looking for Totemic Reflections to try and hit that on 3.
And that is something I've seen from players like Stats as early as week 1, that the Totemic Reflection is of utmost importance. But Possessi says, this gets me there. And Totemic Might, that is huge!
That is huge.
I can't believe I was saying that. This card has never seen play before.
Wow.
I think, as far as I know. Not competitive play, at least.
Gia, the Wicked Witch Doctor Shaman from back in the day was peak Hearthstone. How dare you? Very powerful hand indeed shaping up here for Possessi. Unless Blitzchung wants to go for Penance on the Healing Totem, which every instinct I've learned over my years of Hearthstone is screaming that that is the worst play I've ever seen. But it's probably the only play that keeps Blitzchung in the game.
I mean, okay, so there's 2 punishes. One of them is less likely, but it's in hand for Possessi, which is another totem plus health buff, or the Totemic Reflection, which is probably a lot more likely. And he did see Possessi keep 2 cards. So I think I'm on board with the Penance here.
Me too. I think you can go Penance this turn, and then next turn coin Bone Wraith. It's not great. And to be fair to Blitzchung, he may be making the assumption that I'm just not really beating a disgusting Totemic Reflection hand anyway. But again, I'm on board with you. I think you just got to get it down, try and hit with the Bone Wraith next turn, and pray they can't do the disgustingly powerful turns.
Blitzchung makes the call at the very last second, gets met with the bad news that Possessi has refilled.
Oh my
goodness.
Totem City.
And these are some of the best totems.
3. Yeah.
I would say against Priest, more so than Flame. Oh, I don't know. Flame Tongue would also be pretty awesome once it's copied, right? Mass Dispel.
Mass Dispel is premium here. That is a fantastic discover.
Oh my gosh. We saw the hold back of coin from Blitzchung, maybe instead hoping to coin the Sandhoof, because as it stands, the Bone Wraith won't actually be able to answer a Mana Tide on board. I can understand it.
This is a pretty disciplined play, I think it's fair to say, from Possessi, because he could definitely have gone with double Evil Totem plus Totemic Might and then Splitting Axe on the following turn. But this does float a lot more mana, but it's more powerful immediately. But he is met with the bad news there of the Mass Dispel to put Possessi definitely not back to square one, but not running away with the game either.
True. Possessi going into 5 mana and possibly coin 6 from Blitzchung.
Yeah.
He's probably, in most cases, only scared of 1 AoE. So he could expend Totemic Might and not necessarily the Splitting Axe just yet. Just something like the Evil Totems and then the 2/0 mana buffs. But then board space also becomes something of an issue because you might not get the premium copies off of the Splitting Axe. But I feel like if you're worrying about that, you're probably in the lead.
Sure. I mean, he doesn't have to go for Splitting Axe next turn. If he just goes for Totemic Surge on its own here, this is already a very threatening board.
And Blitzchung, we've seen him hold on to the Breath of the Infinite and the coin, probably setting up for what could be next turn, a double AoE with the coin. But this turn, Bloodlust is looking super scary. So let's do some quick maths. There's 10 showing on board. Bloodlust would be another 18. So the Sandhoof putting him up to 28 is exactly lethal to Bloodlust.
Are you playing around Bloodlust this game, though? I think Blitzchung is far enough behind to the point where he just has to say, I can't really beat Bloodlust.
Well, I think maybe Bone Wraith helps him beat Bloodlust because the second half,
I guess that's not too much of a terrible play just to play around Bloodlust.
Right. I think very well recognized from Blitzchung because this has to soak 2 pieces of damage, and the second half would be awkward for Possessi to deal in most cases. Outside of exactly Bloodlust Lightning Bolt, I think.
Yeah. Sacking away the crab looks perfect to me, and then Reflection on the Evil Totem. Right. Yet more lackeys to start throwing down. I think that looks great. Just start trying to stockpile the Kobold lackeys, I think, is what he's really looking for here, to try and start delivering lethal over the top of Thorns.
I think well recognized also from Possessi to go for Reflection over Splitting Axe, because copying more minions at low health all die to the double AoEs. Blitzchung can still go for it, but it only actually, it still leaves up 3 minions. And a heck of a lot of lackeys in hand.
You'd have to imagine here that Blitzchung is probably gearing up to actually coin Plague of Death on 8. Maybe into Mass Res. I mean, that's what he has to try and set up, I think, in the ideal scenario. Because if he goes for coin double AoE here, I just think he's too far behind and too far away from Plague of Death on turn 9. My thinking is that he can go Psychopomp this turn, which, if there's no Bloodlust, probably keeps him alive, and then go for double AoE into Plague of Death. Probably just dies to that line.
Yeah, it honestly feels too optimistic for me. What I'm looking at is the double AoEs, and then the only really threatening totem left is the 4/2 Evil Totem. The 2/1s are silenced, they're not getting Possessi additional value. And then probably something like Galakrond and hope to snipe the Evil Totem. I don't know.
The axe, though! The axe is insane in that line.
Right. But, everything is not awesome.
Something else is definitely going to have to come together for Blitzchung, be it another Mass Dispel, or of which he has 2 in the deck, or Soul Mirror. Something has to go very right for him here to have any real chance.
Possessi, with an abundance of resources, I think is counting up lethal here, and if he's playing the axe like this, probably has found it.
With Kobold Lackey, yep. Actually, no, I don't count lethal. Yeah, not quite.
So he's saying he's so dead that he doesn't need any additional value off this axe.
Okay, sure.
not sure I'm on board with that. I feel like it's still fine to play the axe, but he could have done minor optimizations like trading something in first.
Yeah.
Either way, though, Blitzchung is still in a world of trouble.
Is that better than Witchy Lackey? I mean, again, you can make the argument that he thinks he's so far in the lead that he should play around Doomsayer here, off of the Hungry Crab, and he doesn't really want to evolve anything else anyway.
Off the Lackey, but Blitzchung can turn it a little bit around now, trade in the Psycho Bomb into the 4/6, and then the double AoE still leaves up 2 Manatides at 2/1. And of course, he's got a whole wave of lackeys to deal with, but that's... And like, oh wait, he's dead, right? He just heals up to 7, and then that's leaving 4 on board, and he's got a weapon. It's not available.
I think there's just nothing.
So are we looking at Holy Nova Coin Psycho Bomb?
No, I don't think there's any outs here. A valiant effort indeed, but again, it's just the downfall of this Priest, which is it's a deck that has 0 possible development in the early game. Even in the best possible instance, the first minion it's possible to play is a 4-drop on 4, and Shaman just seems to prey on that so heavily. If you don't have the powerful AoEs in the mid game with the Moarg Artificer, it feels like, then you're just not getting there.
Blitzchung gives it up. Probably everything mentioned and more running through his mind there. Sees no outs available, and now Zessie is up 2-0. Only needs one more deck to get the win through, and we've just been seeing Priest flop all day. 0-3 for Kin, and now 0-1 for Blitzchung.
Yeah, looking very, very weak. I think Kin did switch off on the final game, but the point still remains. I fully agree. It's been doing absolutely awful here for both of these players, and I think that is in no small part due to the build. I just don't think it's especially well adapted to the metagame. And, you know, I'm not saying that to big me up. What I was going to use that to say is I think this is a huge props to the Japanese players, Glory and Possessi, who, you know, like we've been saying, I imagine they will have been talking strategy together, given they had pretty much identical lineups, and realized very early on the Priest is vulnerable. They can leave that up and arguably use their opponent's thought process against them because they overly rely on the power of the Priest. They believe it to be decent in these matchups. And maybe it's a small sample size, but in my opinion, I just feel like it's really lacking against these aggro decks because of all the health buffs.
You bring up a really good point, is that it has to be not just Priest in their opinion being weak, but also Priest in the opinion of Kin and Blitzchung being strong, because with this format, they're allowed to just not play the Priest if they feel like that the matchup is kind of lacking on their side. So I think that's a really cool kind of side effect of this little pocket meta, as Raven and Sottle call it, that with such a short amount of practice time, a difference of opinion and a difference in, I guess, prep time put in, or just the way you approach prep, one way or another, you're not going to have a very big sample size. So there will be opinions mixed into it. Can have a very, very huge effect on how a series actually plays out.
It can indeed, especially as if you have 2 differing opinions on this instance. One of them's got to be wrong, and whoever turns out to be wrong will probably end up losing a few games along the way. And so far today, it looks like Possessi and Glory leaving up the Priest has been a huge boon in their game plan. And because of that, it's the same instance that we saw in just the previous series, where the Priest went down 0-2, and in the final game, Kin switched to the Shaman, Blitzchung switching to the Druid. Oh no, wait, he played the Druid in the first game. Okay, either way, sorry. The Priest losing, and he's switching off of it and trying to find the win in the final game here.
And
potentially up against the Paladin.
And playing Druid on the play, I think that there was a player this weekend, I can't quite remember who, that kept Rising Winds against an aggressive matchup just to be able to have a 3-2 onto the board. We've seen Blitzchung toss it, and I guess without particularly innervate, it seems a lot less tempting to keep, because you are just going to be playing on turn 2, and then that's in most situations responding, because Paladin is playing 1-drops.
That's true. That's another difference in opinion we've seen with specifically this matchup, which, again, interestingly enough, seems to be related to practice partners, which the 2 main of which that we're seeing this week are the Japanese players and the Hong Kong players here. Alutemu and Glory, I think, were playing very aggressively for their own game plan in this matchup. They were mulliganing away Wrath, mulliganing away Bog Beam, all that early stuff, just to find Overgrowth, plus the Fungal Fortunes ramp up and do their own game plan. Whereas some of the other players, like you mentioned, have been going for more board-focused approaches against the Paladin and Shaman.
I would argue that Blitzchung is playing the game plan A of Druid, not bothering to develop anything to board or remove the McGurgle Prime. He is trying to ramp up, get to the Mount Cellar blowout, and hoping for a late game swing. But with the War Leader, he's probably going to have to hold off on the Overgrowth this turn.
Yeah, I will say that I really like what Possessi's done. We've obviously been focusing on Blitzchung more because it's the more difficult game plan to execute, I think. But holding back the coin there, not going for double one-drop, and setting up for the very powerful curve of Coin Scale Lord on 4, I think was very, very smart. And even War Leader on 3, it's not a particularly genius play, but it does massively disrupt Blitzchung's game plan.
Okay.
But even then, he just goes with the Overgrowth.
Okay. Well, I thought it looked like it had to be Wrath. Maybe I'm caster visioning on the second War Leader. Is that just lethal? 14 plus... I think it's 2 off. Wait.
I think it's lethal, right?
It is lethal. Sorry, I forgot to count the first War Leader attack. It looks like it's 27?
10, 17, 27 damage.
Oh my gosh! What the heck?
Oh, what?
Another 3-0 sweep today, as if this weekend hasn't been going fast enough, as if we don't only have 3 matches tonight. Possessi and Glory are just in a rush to meet each other in the finals. It seems like that's a real heartbreaker for Blitzchung. Had to be that one series to get into Division A, but I'll tell you who is happy. It's Chonsu.
That is exactly right. We now have our Division A and Division B locked out. I will say commiserations to Blitzchung there. That final turn, there is so much to discuss there. It seems like such a deceptively simple play, but we're of course looking at not only the war leader for lethal. That's only a 1-of left in the deck after the first one's been played. He could pop off so much next turn with the Mount Cellar, but he also had a very powerful turn with just Wrath and Hero Power on the play there. Way too much to go into in just a short couple of seconds there, but a very interesting couple of turns there, despite how quick the game was. But as we jump into the bracket, I do just want to say again, commiserations to Blitzchung. I think overall, despite the fact this was the first time we've seen him play this in the Grandmaster system so far this year, he's played very, very well.
Definitely. Happy to see that he made it onto stream at least once in the early rounds, because he is very much known for the aggressive style of play. Maybe didn't get to show his stuff on today in particular because he was queuing up the 2 slower decks, Druid and Priest, knowing that he would have to get a win with at least one of those to eventually win the series. But fear not, for any fans of Blitzchung, he will still be on stream starting next week, as so will everybody else, because the round robin will be featuring everyone, no matter what division they're in.
Oh yes, cannot wait. Get to see all of the GMs. I believe the only one that we haven't seen now is Samuel Sao, as the only player in APAC to finish bottom 8 all 3 weeks in a row, who unsurprisingly is going to be down in Division B. But we want to see everyone show their stuff and what they've been brewing up this year for the competitive Hearthstone scene. But I think unless we can show the bracket there, we're going to be all done for the end of that series. We are, of course, going to have to let, as we can see here, brilliant, Possessi get ready for the next match, because he is going to be lining up against Glory. And what this also means, guaranteed, is that we are going to have a Japanese champion come week 3. The dominance of South Korea finally ends after Rivius and Surrenders wins in weeks 1 and 2.
It's true. I mean, no matter which one of these 4 players could have become champion, that would have kind of ended South Korea's streak. But I would say unsurprising that it's a Japanese player, given that in terms of total country performances, they've just been top of the pack, including the other regions. Japan just is super consistent, very strong players in all 3 of their representatives, which is not to discount Blitzchung and Kin, but my goodness, Possessi and Glory, everything from preparation, lists, and in-game play has seemed on point this weekend.
It has indeed. And while you say you're not surprised to see the two Japanese players in the finals, I think they were pretty surprised, with Glory getting a weird lethal in the Mage versus Priest with Alex Strasser for 0 mana into Frostbolt, and then Possessi twice in that series, once with Pyroblast to the face off of Reno, and once with just being given lethal on turn 5, or turn 4 even, with the War Leader.
Right.
It was a truly ridiculous series where they were left kind of flabbergasted at how quickly they won. But they did everything right to get there, I believe, along the way. Very, very well played coupled series of Hearthstone, which of course means that we are bound to have a fantastic final game for this week before we crown our Week 3 Asia Pacific champion. So like I said, we're going to give Possessi a little bit of a minute to settle his mind, settle his nerves, and get ready for the finals. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with the last match of the day for APAC after this.